Chapter 827. Xian Palace. The Empress Dowager, who always ordered people to observe Shen Yueji's every move, was stunned for a moment when she heard what happened between Shen Yueji and Wu Jiaoyi in the imperial garden. Then she pondered for a long time. Seeing that she was thinking so seriously, Nanny Zhu didn't dare to disturb her. Instead, she stayed by her side respectfully. When she was almost done thinking, Nanny Zhu frowned harder and harder, as if she couldn't figure it out. This was also her usual action and expression for many years. Empress Dowager, you can't figure out what Miss Shen did? Yes. Xian nodded. From the moment Shang fell in love with her, I knew that this woman was different. Otherwise, Shang would not like her so much. However, her excellence is really beyond my expectation. I know that Wu Jiaoyi has bullied a lot of people in the harem. There were so many women in the harem that Nanny Zhu couldn't remember their names. There was only Wu Jiaoyi. Recently, Wu Jiaoyi had hurt people too frequently in the harem. No matter where she went, even in Xian Palace, there were people secretly talking about her. So, Nanny Zhu was not surprised that she knew her name. First published on the Beiyi Chinese website.com. I also feel strange. Most of the women in the harem are kind and generous in order to perform well in front of His Majesty. Since Miss Shen met Wu Jiaoyi and bullied that woman, she should help that woman in front of His Majesty. In this way, she can also have a good reputation in the harem and let those women in the harem know her a little bit. Not only did she not do that, but it seemed that she didn't care that His Majesty was beside her. She still did what she wanted. She even helped Wu Jiaoyi and encouraged her to kill that woman. In this way, I'm afraid that rumors about her will spread in the harem again. People will say that she acted recklessly and lawlessly in the harem because of His Majesty's favor. She even treated people's lives as grass. Instead, she sided with evil people and hurt good people. Yes. Speaking up to this point, Xian suddenly laughed. The women in the harem are all scheming. That woman who gets beaten all the time might not be that kind. She took advantage of being bullied by Wu Jiaoyi all day long to show off her feelings. Others might not know, but I know what she's thinking. Could it be that Shen Yueji saw through something? Empress Dowager means that Miss Shen saw through that woman's ulterior motives. Other than that, I really don't understand why Shen Yueji would incite Wu Jiaoyi to take her life. She can't be as spoiled and disregarding human life as the rumors in the harem say, can she? If she was really such a vicious woman, according to the character of the white-haired granny, it was impossible for her to like her so much. The fastest network update mobile M.com. The Empress Dowager has a discerning eye. Can't you see through a person's character with just a glance? Speaking of which, Empress Dowager, young Lady Shen has been in the palace for some time. Don't you want to see what this future rumored daughter-in-law is like? After listening to Nanny Zhu's words, Xian covered his mouth awkwardly and coughed. In fact, she, her future daughter-in-law, had secretly taken a peek the day she entered the palace. Fearing that Nanny Zhu would tease her, she didn't tell anyone about this matter. In the dead of night, without anyone knowing, she sneaked out of Xian Palace. Using her meager martial arts skills, she went to the roof of Zhengyang Palace and looked down. If she wanted to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute favorite concubine, the Prince Regent, gets into trouble, she followed Yudu literature. Chapter 828. Shen Yueji's every move, as well as her outstanding appearance, were naturally under her eyes. Fortunately, that old thing praised her future daughter-in-law to the skies. When she saw it, she was especially satisfied. Yes, her daughter-in-law was beautiful. Just the way she sat and behaved made people feel comfortable no matter how they looked at her. Therefore, after seeing her future daughter-in-law eagerly, Xian could bear it. If it weren't for the fact that they had met in advance, she was afraid that Shen Yueji wouldn't have taken the initiative to meet her, and she wouldn't have held back for so many days to not summon her. You're right. I've ignored her for some time, and it's time to meet her. Go to Zhengyang Palace personally and pass the message that I want to see her. Yes, Empress Dowager. Granny Zhu smiled, bowed respectfully, and was about to leave. However, as soon as she turned around, she heard Xian hurriedly stop her from behind. Granny Zhu, Do you think it's okay for me to meet her in this dress? Will it look very dignified? Will it scare her? Does Jia like a kind mother-in-law or a dignified and easygoing one? She threw a few questions in a row. Granny Zhu found it funny, but she didn't dare to laugh out loud. She just said, Empress Dowager and Miss Shen will definitely hit it off at first sight, and they will have endless topics to talk about. Empress Dowager, don't worry. Miss Shen will definitely like you very much. Oh, when she comes later, what gift should I give her? I heard that she is quite favored in Foam Country, and the whole Shen family spoils her so much. I guess she doesn't care about those silks and satins. Coincidentally, I don't like those things very much either. If I give her these things, it will seem too tacky, right? Thinking of this, Xian was in a dilemma. She hurriedly stood up from her seat and paced around. Seeing that Nanny Zhu was about to go out, she hurriedly stopped her. Don't rush to inform her. Come here and think about it with me first. When Jia comes later, what gift should I give her that she will like and not feel tacky? These days, that old thing has been showing her presence in front of Jia a lot. I think Jia likes her very much. This fake mother-in-law of hers has been hanging around her daughter-in-law more than me, the real mother-in-law. Tell me, what if Jia likes this fake mother-in-law and doesn't like me, the real mother-in-law? Originals, domain names. Please remember Xian's tone was disappointed, and she began to feel deep regret. Alas, she sighed in her heart. If she had known this would happen, she would have gone to see Jia on the day she came over, instead of climbing on the roof to peek. Why did she have to show off her identity? What was more important than seeing her daughter-in-law? New Bei Chinese website.com. This time, she let the old thing with white hair take advantage of the loophole. She was afraid that Jia now only had her as her mother-in-law in her heart, and didn't care about her anymore. Empress Dowager, you think too much. Through this servant's observation of Miss Shen these days, Miss Shen is not that kind of person. Empress Dowager, rest assured. The gift is light, but the sentiment is heavy. Miss Shen doesn't seem to be the kind of person who likes expensive gifts. This servant only needs to go to Zhengyang Palace to call her. At that time, Empress Dowager will say a few words to her. I believe that at that time, Miss Shen will feel that she and Empress Dowager are like-minded, and may even surpass the white-hair granny. Really? Empress Dowager narrowed her eyes, showing that she didn't believe it, but what could she do? Who told her to call her daughter-in-law now? She waved her hand at Nanny Zhu. If you want to chat with more like-minded people about exploding cute pet concubine, regent, get into trouble, WeChat, chat about life, find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 829. Okay, then you go to Zhengyang Palace quickly. When Jia comes, you must inform Ari Jiao in advance. Ari Jiao will do well and prepare well. Yes, Empress Dowager. As soon as Junani turned around, she was surprised by a beautiful figure. The moment she saw Pang Yuan, she hurriedly bowed and saluted, Imperial Concubine. Pang Yuan's arrival not only surprised Junani, but also the Empress Dowager. Originally, she was worried about how she should behave when her daughter-in-law came. Now, hearing Junani's salute, her eyes moved to Pang Yuan. Maybe she was disappointed by what Pang Yuan had done in private. Her expression was also indifferent, far from the enthusiasm she had when she saw Pang Yuan. When did Ari Jiao's Xian Palace become a place where you can enter whenever you want? You don't even need to inform me. Do you think that Ari Jiao, an old woman, doesn't need to inform me? With a smile on her face, Pang Yuan ran towards her in a spoiled tone and naturally hugged her arm. Empress Dowager, what are you talking about? It's not that WNR didn't inform me, but when I came in, there was no one outside the Xian Palace, not even a servant guarding the door. WNR didn't even see Junani. Otherwise, how could WNR come in without notifying me? WNR was worried about you, Empress Dowager, so she trespassed. First, domain, please remember she stuck out her tongue at her embarrassedly. Empress Dowager, you have doted on WNR since I was a child. You shouldn't be angry with WNR, right? Xian snappily rolled her eyes. How dare Ari Jiao be angry with you? Maybe you will remember it in your heart. Ari Jiao's old bones can't bear your torment. Pang Yuan was not a fool. How could she not understand the meaning of her words? His complexion became unsightly, but he didn't dare to flare up. He continued to hold her arm and smiled fawningly. Empress Dowager, look at you. Wan knows she was wrong. Can you forgive Wan? Wan knows that she has done many wrong things, but the reason why Wan did this is because she likes Brother Emperor too much. Moreover, that woman from the Foam Kingdom has ulterior motives. She was originally the imperial consort of the Foam Kingdom's emperor. In the Foam Kingdom, she is very favored. The Foam Kingdom's emperor is also a young and handsome man. There is no need for her to give up on the Foam Kingdom's emperor and choose to marry to a place like the Northern Underworld. The reason why Wan did this was for Baiming's safety and Brother Emperor's sake. Wan didn't want to take her life originally. In the capital of Foam Country, I already punished her slightly and reminded her. Who knew that this woman would be so stupid? She didn't even know my kind reminder and still came to Baiming. www.com. Empress Dowager, seeing that Xian was still ignoring her, Pang Yuan suppressed the impatience in her heart and kept shaking her arm. Empress Dowager is so biased towards that outsider. Do you know how sad Wan is? Up until now, Wan didn't do anything to her. Regarding this matter, father and mother-in-law have already heavily reprimanded and hit me. Wan also knows she was wrong. Empress Dowager has also given Wan the cold shoulder for so long. Empress Dowager, can you not stoop to Wan's level because Wan is young and insensible? After all, she had watched Pang Shen grow up. In addition, she had also seen Pang Shen's loyalty to her for so many years. If you want to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute favorite concubine, regent, get into trouble, follow Yudu literature. Chapter 830. Xian sighed and touched her hair. Don't do it again. Do you understand? I know. Empress Dowager, don't you trust Wan? Wan has always listened to you since she was a child. You know that. Xian rolled his eyes at her and snorted. His tone was filled with endless affection and love for her. Is it because he listens to Ari Jiao, or because Ari Jiao is Shang's mother, so my words carry more weight with him? You little girl, you have been clever since you were a child. Do you really think that I will believe you? Empress Dowager. Pang Yuan looked at her embarrassedly. What are you talking about? Wan has always treated you as her own mother. Wan lost her mother when she was a child. Wan has always remembered the Empress Dowager's kindness to me and never dared to disobey her. Empress Dowager, Pang Yuan's tone became dejected. The words of not having a mother was like a thorn in Xian's heart. Firstly, she loved Wan since she was a child. Secondly, if it were not for her mother, she would have been the one who died. She had always owed her mother her life. Furthermore, she had caused Pang Shen to lose the woman he loved at such a young age. She felt even more guilty towards Wan. All these years, she could only treat Wan as her own daughter. She cared for her and loved her even more. It seemed that this was the only way she could repay Pang Shen and his late wife for their efforts and kindness towards her. She even secretly cooperated with the Dark Poison cult to deal with Shen Yueji. If it were not for the fact that the white-haired old woman was highly skilled in martial arts, she might even have died in her hands. When she found out about this, she was really angry. She was so angry that she wanted to punish Wan on the spot. The white-haired old woman was like her own mother in her heart. How could she let her go if something bad happened to the white-haired old woman? But for her mother's sake, she kept her mouth shut about this matter. Even when her father came to the palace today and tried to get information out of her mouth, for her sake, she didn't tell him. She only said it was a small quarrel between children and didn't let Pang Shen get involved. Pang Shen saw that he couldn't get anything out of her. Perhaps he felt that there was no need for her to lie to him. After all, in his eyes, Pang Yuan was just spoiled rotten, but she was kind and had a conscience. Xian sighed. He really didn't know what to do. He understood Pang Yuan's thoughts. It was not just what Pang Shen thought. He felt that he treated his daughter as his own daughter, so he lacked a lot in teaching her. He only wanted to serve Dark North wholeheartedly. New Bei Chinese website. If Pang Yuan was really kind-hearted, how could a vicious sect like the Dark Poison cult listen to her? Through the incident with Shen Yueji, Xian discovered that Pang Yuan's temperament was one that would not listen to advice at all. She would hate whoever tried to persuade her. New Bei Chinese website.com. Even she was no exception. Although she respected Lin Mengya because she was Shang-Er's mother, everyone knew that behind this respect, Lin Mengya was afraid that Lin Mengya already hated Lin Mengya and did not want to see Lin Mengya anymore. Lin Mengya didn't say it out loud. She was not a fool. She was a person with one foot in the grave. When it came to some things and behaviors, she thought that she knew more than this little girl. Empress Dowager, Granny Zhu stood on the side and felt a little embarrassed. At this time, she didn't know whether she should go to Zhengyang Palace and ask Shen Yueji to come over. To talk about super cute pet concubine, Prince Regent, get into trouble with more like-minded people, WeChat followed you read literature. Talk about life and find bosom friends tilde. Chapter 831. After all, concubine Pang and Shen Yueji had conflicts. If the two of them were to bump into each other, Empress Dowager, when I just came in, I vaguely heard you talking to Mammy Zhu. You asked Mammy Zhu to send a message to Zhengyang Palace. Do you want to see Shen Yueji? Pang Yuan's seemingly ignorant question. In fact, the two of them understood the underlying meaning behind her words. This girl must have heard most of the conversation between her and Nanny Zhu in Xian Palace. Otherwise, she would not have questioned them in such a tone. Xian knew that since she had heard it, she couldn't tell Nanny Zhu not to allow Shen Yueji to come, because it was obvious that she was deliberately targeting her. She teased, not knowing what to say for a moment. After all, she had watched Pang Yuan grow up. She was more or less clear about Pang Yuan's character. However, Shen Yueji was different. She could only understand her from other people's mouths. As for her personality and the way she handled things, including how Pang Yuan had schemed against her 2 days ago and tried to take her life, one was Wn whom he had watched grow up and treated like his own daughter. The other was his future daughter-in-law. Huashin Originals, domain names, please remember Empress Dowager. Do you still remember the matter of Wn ordering people to kill her? Didn't Wan say it? Wan doesn't want to do this. After all, Wan has no grudges with her. However, she is from the Feng Nation and a royal consort of the Feng Nation. The Feng Nation's emperor loves her so much, yet she still took the risk to come here. Wan, do you think that the emperor isn't outstanding enough? That's why Shen Yueji should choose the emperor of Feng country and not Shang-Er. www.com. No, Empress Dowager Wan didn't mean that. Wan doesn't mean that. Pang Yuan never thought that this old woman would react so quickly and follow up on her words so quickly. She hurriedly waved her hands. Empress Dowager, everyone knows how outstanding Brother Emperor is. Wan is no exception. In Wn's eyes, Brother Emperor is the most outstanding man in the world. No one can be compared to him. Wan means. She took Xian's hand and shook it. Wan is suspecting that Shen Yueji has ulterior motives. Wan has already explained it to the Empress Dowager. Otherwise, why would Wan go through so much trouble to take her life? Isn't her goal the Emperor brother? Now, she has come to Beiming's harem. Brother Emperor likes her so much that even Empress Dowager and the white-haired granny have acknowledged her. Regarding this, Wan has nothing to say. As long as she treats Brother Emperor sincerely and respects Empress Dowager sincerely, just like Wan will be content. Wan is also willing to call her sister in the future. No matter what she did or said before, at least Xian was quite satisfied with what she said. She patted the back of Pang Yuan's hand and said, "It's good that you can think this way. I really wanted you to be my daughter-in-law before. After all, I watched you grow up. I know your character and temperament. But fate makes fools of people. I like you, but it doesn't mean that Shang-Er likes you. If he..." Empress Dowager. Pang Yuan's voice was filled with resentment. Even the hand that was shaking Ji and Er's arm hardened. Empress Dowager, what are you talking about? Of course Brother Emperor likes Wan If you want to chat with more like-minded people about super cute favorite concubine, Prince Regent, gets into trouble, follow Yudu literature. Chapter 832. It's just that the women outside dazzle my brother. One day, my brother will know who treats him sincerely and loves him sincerely. Xian subconsciously exchanged a look with Nanny Zhu. Nanny Zhu quickly bowed. Yes, Empress Dowager. I will go to Zhengyang Palace as soon as possible and ask Miss Shen to pay her respects to you. She watched Nanny Zhu go out. Pang Yuan's eyes turned quickly, and then she couldn't help grasping the back of Xian's hand. She seemed to ask intentionally or unintentionally, Empress Dowager, from what Nanny Zhu said, it seems that Shen Yueji hasn't taken the initiative to pay her respects to you. Xian's hand was a little painful because of her grip, but she didn't take the initiative to remind her. Instead, she said, yes, she hasn't taken the initiative to pay her respects to me. Then this woman is too much. She doesn't know what's good for her. Pang Yuan stood up angrily and looked at Xian. Empress Dowager, you are also the Empress Dowager of a country. Who does Shen Yueji think she is? She is just a woman from Feng country. My brother hasn't conferred her the title of Empress yet, but she dares to be so arrogant. If my brother conferred her the title of Empress, wouldn't she be even more proud? Wouldn't she look down on you? Empress Dowager. Pang Yuan was also a person who knew how to speak according to others' mood. She saw that Xian didn't say anything, so she obediently squatted down in front of her and looked indignant. Empress Dowager, do you know that after knowing that she came to Beiming, and after being reprimanded by the white-haired granny last night, Wan deeply knew that she had done something wrong. So, the next day, Wan ran to Shen Yueji to apologize. Empress Dowager, you know that Wan has been spoiled by father and you since she was a child. Even if she did something wrong, she would never admit it. She would only act like a spoiled child in front of you. Empress Dowager and father have always doted on Wan and were never willing to scold Wan. But for my brother, Wan took the initiative to marry Shen Yueji. Especially after knowing that Empress Dowager was very satisfied with her, Wan didn't want my brother and Empress Dowager to be embarrassed. Wan planned to take the initiative to apologize to Shen Yueji. In the future, in this harem, she would be a companion and we could get along well. Who knew? Speaking of this, she actually cried in a low voice and pouted, but who knew that Shen Yueji? It was hard for her to say the rest of her words. Xiao who was behind her, understood and hurriedly knelt on the ground. Empress Dowager, I saw her ladyship's embarrassment and goodwill. Shen Yueji doesn't know what's good for her. Even a person of her ladyship's status took the initiative to apologize to her. Who knew that Shen Yueji not only didn't accept her ladyship's apology, but also spoke ill of her ladyship. Not only that, she also made things difficult for her ladyship. Even, what else? He also said that when he sees Grand Tutor Pang one day, he will tell Grand Tutor Pang and the people of the capital about the matter of your highness secretly colluding with Poison Yuji cult. He will completely destroy the reputation of Imperial Consort Nyang. She didn't say it today because she's not familiar with the matters of the northern underworld. Even if she said it, she wouldn't be able to convince anyone. So. Xiao's face was filled with indignation. When she mentioned Pang Yuan, her face was filled with righteous indignation, as if Pang Yuan had suffered a great deal in her hands. She was so angry that she couldn't even speak clearly. The rest of the words, Pang Yuan didn't wait for her to finish and reprimanded her sternly. Who allowed you to say this? Baiduan read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, Regent, Provoking Body Claw Book House for free. Chapter 833. The words of reprimand were just right. Speaking of this, Pang Yuan was quite clever. However, these behaviors and little cleverness might be seen by others, but she, Xian, was experienced. She could see through Pang Yuan's behavior at a glance. She narrowed her eyes. There was no anger or annoyance in her tone. It was just a very normal tone. Okay. There is a misunderstanding between Wan and Shen Yueji. Why don't you think about it yourself? If you didn't take the initiative to find trouble with her, she wouldn't have to threaten you like this. As she said, she glanced at Xiao, who was afraid that the matter was not big enough and was still making trouble. What kind of servants are you raising? Their master did something wrong, but they don't know how to comfort their master. Instead, they know how to add oil and vinegar and confuse black and white. She's not some saint. You've already taken her life, so why should she treat you differently just because of a misunderstanding and an apology? Pang Yuan looked embarrassed. Because the Empress Dowager was pointing at the mulberry tree and scolding the locust tree, she didn't dare to say anything. Even Xiao didn't expect that the Empress Dowager would blame her. Anyway, she was just a servant. How could she be so bold? Even if she was the favorite of the imperial concubine, she didn't dare. As servants, they all had a deep understanding of the imperial concubine's character. How could they dare to be disrespectful to the imperial concubine? If their words made the imperial consort dissatisfied, they might not even be able to keep their lives. This time, Xiao really couldn't say anything. Fortunately, the Empress Dowager just scolded her and didn't do anything to her. Compared with the imperial concubine, the Empress Dowager treated her much better. Her eyes turned red and she knelt on the ground. Yes, Empress Dowager, I was wrong. I will persuade you in the future. Mobile M. Reflect on yourself. Pang Yuan was even more angry at this moment. After all, Xiao was just her servant. In this harem, who didn't know her character? Why did she need a servant to tell her what to do when she wanted to do it herself? She was so angry that her little face couldn't be twisted. New August Chinese Netawu. From this position, Cian could clearly see her little face contorted in anger. He sighed and shook his head. This lass seemed to be more vicious than he had imagined. She really didn't expect that her mother, who was so gentle and kind when she was alive, would become so malicious and scheming when it came to her. Who exactly did she resemble with her vicious temper? If it was someone like Grand Tutor Pang, he was a god of war on the battlefield and was full of righteousness. How could he have such deep schemes and vicious thoughts? The Pang family only had one daughter, and the fault of the children was mostly on their parents. Wn's mother passed away early, so her father's discipline towards her was naturally not as meticulous as her mother's. Could it be her? Was it her pampering and indulging of her that caused her to develop such a personality? She did it for the sake of the Pang family's sacrifice for her, including those women in the harem. If they didn't take the initiative to find trouble with her and pretend to be good to her, they were actually using her to inquire about the emperor and use the purpose of seeing the emperor as an excuse. She also believed that WNO wouldn't take the initiative to find trouble with them. After all, there were so many women in the harem. She also believed that she didn't have so much time to find trouble with them one by one. If she wanted to chat with more like-minded people about exploding cute pet concubine, regent, get into trouble, WeChat followed you read literature. Chat about life and find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 834. Cian shook her head with a headache. She treated WNE as her own daughter, and even more so for her benefactor. She didn't expect that WANE would become like this. Now, she had her own thoughts, her own ideas. She couldn't teach her anymore. She could almost foresee what would happen to Pang Yuan in the future. Although Shonga didn't tell her that WNE had colluded with the dark poisonous cult to assassinate Shen Yueji, she knew that this matter couldn't be forgotten. Shonga's character was very similar to her man's. Once he decided on something, even 10 oxen couldn't pull him back. Especially when WNE dared to hurt the woman he loved. That was definitely the deepest thorn in his heart. If it wasn't removed, it would always be on his mind. He always wanted to get rid of it. Thinking of this, she got up and went to the inner hall without a word. Pang Yuan saw her get up and hurried over to help her. Empress Dowager, where are you going? WANE will help you. Cian waved his hand at her. I'm not that old yet. Wait for me outside. I'll be out in a while. www.com. Hearing this, Pang Yuan didn't dare to refute. She could only let go of her hand and watch her go in. When she was completely in the inner hall, her figure disappeared. Pang Yuan suddenly kicked Xiao hard. Xiao was still kneeling. This angle made it easy for Pang Yuan to kick her chest. Xiao was kicked to the ground almost immediately. She was in so much pain that she couldn't breathe for a long time. She couldn't even speak for a long time. The moment she was kicked down by Pang Yuan, she saw her kneeling on the ground. Although she couldn't open her mouth or speak, she still tried hard to kowtow to Pang Yuan, begging for her forgiveness. She really didn't mean it. She thought that if she said this, the Empress Dowager would feel sorry for Imperial Concubine. After all, the Empress Dowager had watched Imperial Concubine grow up. In the harem, no matter what Imperial Concubine did, even if she did something wrong, the Empress Dowager would not punish her. If the Empress Dowager knew that Imperial Concubine had been mocked and threatened by Shen Yueji because of her initiative to please Shen Yueji, Xiao thought that the Empress Dowager would feel sorry for Imperial Concubine and would avenge her. If the Empress Dowager didn't intend to avenge Imperial Concubine because Imperial Concubine was insulted and threatened by Shen Yueji, this way, the Empress would remember her contributions and all the mistakes she had made before would be cancelled out in the Empress' heart. Her future days would also be better. But she had never thought that the Empress Dowager's answer would be completely out of her expectations. This kind of indirect scolding, wasn't it referring to her Empress? When the Empress Dowager scolded her, Xiao knew that she would be blamed. Xiao knew that Imperial Concubine was Xiao. Xiao cried. After a while, she was finally able to breathe and speak normally. Her voice was still a little hoarse. Maybe it was because Pang Yuan's kick was not light. She kowtowed to Pang Yuan in embarrassment. Your Highness, I'm sorry. Your Highness, I don't know how things turned out like this. I thought that according to the Empress Dowager's love for you, she would definitely avenge you. Even if the Empress Dowager took into account the Emperor, she would definitely ignore Shen Yueji for a period of time. After all, in the Empress Dowager's heart, Imperial Concubine is the most important. But the website was updated the fastest. On the computer, I want to chat with more like-minded people about super cute pet concubine, Prince Regent, get into trouble. Talk about life and find bosom friends Tilda. Chapter 835. Blood was about to spurt out in front of Pang Yuan. Pang Yuan swallowed the blood because of the woman's cold and threatening eyes. As a result of swallowing the blood too fast, she suddenly coughed heavily. She didn't catch her breath for a long time. Pang Yuan stared at her dangerously. This is the Empress Dowager's Xian Palace. Remember, it's not my pure young palace. You'd better keep your voice down. If the Empress Dowager hears it, I'll kill you when we go back. Xiao was so frightened that her whole body trembled, and she did not dare to cough loudly anymore. Even when the feeling of coughing came, she also trembled fiercely and swallowed it with all her might. Even when her face turned red in the end, she did not dare to make the slightest sound of coughing. Her face was red, and her eyes were red and swollen. Your Highness, I'm sorry. I messed up things again. What should I do now? And it seemed that the Empress Dowager just reprimanded her a few words and didn't. Fortunately, the Empress Dowager just said a few words. If she really found trouble with Pang Yuan, maybe she would have been a corpse now. How could she live until now? What should I do? I have to ask you about this. Pang Yuan snorted coldly. If it weren't for the consideration that this was Xian Palace, if she did anything to this little bitch, she would be found out when the Empress Dowager came out. She also endured it. How uncomfortable it was for her to hold it back. Not long after, she saw Xian coming out from inside. She seemed to give Pang Yuan enough time. Pang Yuan didn't know if it was an illusion, but she always felt that the Empress Dowager came out at the right time, giving her enough time to vent. When she finished venting, she came out. The moment she saw Xian coming out from inside, Pang Yuan hurriedly stood up properly. When she went in, there was no blood at the corner of Xiao's mouth. When she came out, not to mention that her clothes were in a mess, even the bright red blood at the corner of her mouth was not wiped clean. It could be imagined how cruelly Pang Yuan treated her maidservant during the time she went in. Xian's eyes flashed, and something flashed through her eyes quickly. Thinking of WN now, she also felt sorry. In fact, WN could have been better and could have been taught better. She didn't have to be like this at all. If she had known that blindly indulging and pampering her would turn her into this, she would have taught her a lesson from the start. She would have personally brought her to her side and watched over her wherever she went. She would have taught her how to treat others kindly. That way, she wouldn't have turned out to be so vicious and frightening, whether it was shrewdness or thoughts. To be honest, in Xian's heart, she was indeed quite afraid of her. She was afraid that she would mess around again, afraid that she would play tricks behind her back, afraid that she would do something again. At that time, Shang-Er would not spare her, and even she would not be able to save her. She was afraid that if things really came to that point, not only would she let down her dead mother, the Pang family had sacrificed so much for her Dark North Empire, but she would not be able to repay them at all. Xian from her to her. Ping. She thought. To, she of. WAN has been waiting for a long time. WAN is about to get sleepy. Baiduan read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine. The Prince Regent gets into trouble with Claw Bookhouse free of charge. The reason why she doted on her was because she and her mother had similar appearances. I only have one of these death exemption medallions. When the late emperor passed away, he left it for me. He asked me to use it on those officials who were useful to me. You also know that when the late emperor passed away, the rebels in the court were eyeing the throne covetously. There were many loyal officials who followed the late emperor to conquer the country, and your father was one of them. The late emperor was worried that those rebels would conspire to frame the loyal officials, so this exemption card was used on those loyal officials, so they could be spared once. Then the Empress Dowager. She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute favorite concubine, Regent, get into trouble. Chat about life, find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 837. Pang Yuan couldn't understand. Then why did Empress Dowager give this death exemption token to WAN? WAN is just a woman in my brother's harem. She doesn't need this death exemption token at all. If they really need it, only those ministers in the court need it. WAN is simply, even if those ministers didn't need it, it would be good to give it to her father. Why did she give it to her? WAN, don't you understand? Empress Dowager, when your mother was alive, she was gentle, kind, and magnanimous, but you were the complete opposite of her. You were spoiled by your father and became lawless and condescending. You put yourself first in everything. Speaking of this, it's all my fault. After all, Pangshan is a man. He worked for Dark North on the battlefield and entrusted you to me. But for your mother's sake, I have always indulged you and treated you well. I thought I loved you and cherished you. But I forgot to tell you that you are always demanding. Relying on your identity, you are lawless in this harem and do whatever you want. If you can't get what you want, you will use abnormal means to kill people and treat anyone you don't like cruelly. This is the real harm to you. www.com. Now, you are an adult and have your own thoughts and ideas. I know that no matter what I say, it will be no different. Maybe in your heart, you will be jealous and angry with me. Speaking up to this point, Xian shook his head. WN, speaking of which, it is all my fault that you have made such a mistake today. If I had properly taught you from a young age, taught you how to be a person, you wouldn't have relied on your status to do whatever you wanted in this harem and be lawless. Perhaps, by now, your mind is as pure as a piece of white paper. In this harem, I can still protect you. What schemes, what deceit, as long as I am here, as long as I am alive, you will be safe. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't moved. Pang Yuan looked at her with red eyes. Empress Dowager, do you think I have become cruel and vicious? Xian sighed but didn't say anything. It was precisely because she did not say anything that it confirmed to Pang Yuan that everything she said was blaming her. She felt that Pang Yuan was being unreasonable, that she, and this death exemption gold medal. Pang Yuan couldn't help clenching the death exemption gold medal in her hand. She was neither excited nor happy. From the moment she took out the death exemption medallion, from the moment she gave it to her, she was not happy at all. She could not be happy at all. Because she knew that the Empress Dowager was disappointed in her. She thought that sooner or later, the Empress Dowager would give up protecting her and protect her. Therefore, the Empress Dowager gave the golden medallion to her, hoping that when the Empress Dowager could not even protect them, the Empress Dowager would save her life for the sake of the golden medallion. Pang Yuan suddenly laughed coldly. Looking at Cin, she suddenly raised her hand and smashed the death exemption medallion in front of Ci, and Cin's eyes flashed with sharpness. In the harem, she was the most powerful woman. Not to mention an imperial concubine, even if there was an empress in the future, none of the women in the harem dared to be so presumptuous in front of her. But this Pang Yuan had long been arrogant and looked down on her. She wanted to get angry, but Cin forced herself to hold back. Speaking of which, if she wanted to chat with more like-minded people about super cute pet concubine, Prince Regent, get into trouble. Talk about life and find bosom friends tilde. Chapter 838. It was all her fault that Wan became like this. She was sorry to her mother and Wan. She didn't want to be more sorry to her. Thinking of the sad past, Cin closed her eyes. Her eyes were slightly red, but she didn't want Pang Yuan to see it. In fact, her life was not so smooth. The man who loved her was the emperor of a country. He carried the responsibilities and burdens of a country. Just for her, she did not know how much effort he had put in behind the scenes. Even the quarrels between the court officials and the common people had never stopped. He was busy every day, but he still could not bear to let her know of his difficulties. He only gave her a smile, a gentle smile, and carried all the burdens on her shoulders, carrying them alone. And her friends. In her life, there were very few friends worth making. Most of them were friends with her for their own selfish desires. Only her mother, so whether it was Wan or Shang, she was willing to listen to Shang. What he wanted to do and what he liked, she would try her best to accept and abide by his preferences. Because she had experienced that it was really not easy for a man in a royal family to like a woman. On the contrary, it was really difficult. She didn't want her only son to really put his life on the throne and live only for the world, not for himself. And Pang Yuan didn't feel that she had done anything wrong, even if she despised the Empress Dowager. Xiao, who was kneeling on the ground, was scared. In the past, she only thought that the Empress Dowager was cruel, but now she didn't think so. She was clearly reckless. How could she despise the Empress Dowager like this? Did she know what she was doing? How dare she smash something in front of the Empress Dowager? She was so presumptuous. Even as an outsider, she knew that the Empress Dowager did it out of kindness. But she didn't know that she was so rude to the Empress Dowager. Have you vented enough? Cin silently watched her vent her anger on him, especially the death exemption medallion. If he hadn't reacted quickly and moved his head aside in time, he was afraid that the stone-hard object would have smashed a hole in his head. First, Domain, please remember Empress Dowager. Do you also think that Wan is cruel and merciless, killing people like flies? She's not fit to be the imperial concubine of the Dark North Kingdom? Pang Yuan smiled coldly. All these years, I've done it for Brother Emperor without any complaints or regrets. All I wanted was to gain Brother Emperor's favor. But Empress Dowager, do you know what I've gotten in return? Since I entered the palace, I don't know how many ways I have thought of, just to be able to attract the attention of the Emperor. Here, I have no friends, only myself. All day long, I shut myself in the huge Pyongyang palace. Those women who approach me have another purpose. They're just trying to get close to me. That way, they can get the Emperor's attention. Mobile M. What a joke. What's funny is how should I tell them? Do I have to tell them that Brother Emperor has never interacted with me in private? Not to mention them, even for me, it's more difficult than ascending to the heavens to see Brother Emperor. Empress Dowager, you're also a woman. When you followed the late emperor loved you so much. You must not know the taste of being ignored and abandoned. If you want to chat with more like-minded people about exploding cute pet concubine, regent, get into trouble, WeChat, talk about life, find a confidant tilde. Chapter 839. I just don't understand. I, Pang Yuan, have the looks and the status, and I love him more than that woman. I've loved him for so many years without any regrets. Why? Why does my brother, the emperor, like her and not me? Empress Dowager, Wana feels bad, Wana feels bad. Wana always thought that the Empress Dowager was the one who understood Wana the most, but even you are now siding with that woman. Wana really didn't know what she did wrong. Was it wrong from the moment she entered the palace, or was it wrong from the moment she fell in love with my brother, the emperor? But is it wrong to love someone? Why don't you like me? Why do you all teach me a lesson? Or did that woman give you something good to make you all think she's better than me, better than me? Why don't you all calm down and think about her goal? Why did she get close to my brother, and what was her goal? Why do you only see my bad side and only know how to make trouble for me, but not? Perhaps she really felt wronged. Pang Yuan hugged herself sadly, squatting down and quietly sobbing. She really didn't know what she did wrong. If it was as she said, that it was wrong to love someone, then wasn't it wrong for everyone in the world to love someone? She didn't think it was wrong for her to love her brother, the emperor. From the first time she saw her brother, she fell deeply in love with him. She didn't ask for anything, she just wanted to be with her brother, for the rest of her life. Even if he wasn't the emperor, as long as he was willing to look at her, she would be so happy that she wouldn't be able to sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Xian didn't speak again because she knew there was no need to. Pang Yuan was already an adult. Whether it was her actions or her methods, she was now an adult with her own thoughts. If she was still young, she could still teach her, but now that she was an adult, she could no longer teach her. Pang Yuan saw that she didn't speak and thought she was blocked by her words. She still didn't think she was wrong. She walked to Xian and held her hand, still speaking in a coquettish tone. Empress Dowager, you can't be so biased. You watched Wana grow up. Who does Shen Yueji think she is? Are you just going to watch my brother be bewitched by that evil woman? What benefits can she give you? She's a spy sent by the Foam Kingdom, and her relationship with the Foam Kingdom's emperor is unclear. Putting aside the fact that she's two-timing, who knows what her intentions are? No matter how attentive she is still the woman Shong'er has taken a liking to. I only have this one son. It's rare that he's enlightened about women. Do you want me to break up their relationship? Empress Dowager, I gave you the death exemption medallion out of kindness. If Wana doesn't appreciate it, then pick it up and give it back to me. You must remember that this death exemption medallion was given to you by me, not for you to use on me. You are also an imperial concubine of a country, so where have you learned such manners and manners? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at if others see it? Pang Yuan also knew that she had gone too far just now, giving the Empress Dowager the right to scold her. She pouted and didn't dare to refute for herself. Shong'er was also smart. Seeing that the Empress Dowager was vaguely angry, she quickly crawled over. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Regent, Messing with Clawbook House for free. Chapter 840. He picked up the death exemption medallion and handed it to Pang Yuan respectfully. Your Highness, this is the Empress Dowager's kindness. She only bestowed this death exemption medallion to you because she dotes on you too much. Think about it. She carefully leaned close to Pang Yuan's ear and whispered, with this death exemption medallion, no matter what your Highness does in the future, you will be able to avoid death. This means that the Empress Dowager sincerely favors your Highness. Otherwise, why would she bestow this death exemption medallion to you? Even that woman from Foam Nation, no matter how much the Empress Dowager said she liked her, she didn't give this honor to her. On the computer, Pang Yuan felt that Shong'er's words were reasonable. Looking at Shong'er's face, Pang Yuan suddenly felt that she was more pleasing to the eye. She took the immortal gold medallion from her hands. Huashin Originals, domain names, please remember. Pang Yuan glanced at it. She seemed to have thought of something and suddenly laughed. She walked up to Xian with a fawning face and carefully held her arm. No matter what the Empress Dowager says, Wan will be obedient. Just now, Wan was too impulsive. Empress Dowager, please forgive Wan and don't mind Wan's mistake, okay? Knowing her character, the Empress Dowager was too lazy to argue with her. When Jia comes, don't use your identity as a Guifei to pressure her, understand? I know, Empress Dowager. She hasn't come yet, but you're already afraid that I'll do something to her. She's already in our Beiming's harem. No matter how much Wan doesn't like her, she won't dare to do anything to her. Now, not only did she have the Empress Dowager and the others to protect her, even her older brother the Emperor liked her so much. If she really dared to hurt her, her older brother the Emperor would be the first to object. She recalled that the Empress Dowager had just given her the immunity medallion. Pang Yuan's lips curled into a scheming smile. Zhengyang Palace. After returning from the Imperial Garden, Shen Yueji had the rare leisure to play chess with a man. However, halfway through the game, she saw someone outside. She had never met Nanny Zhu, but she had heard Double Happiness mention her. On the first day of Double Happiness's arrival in the northern underworld, he had investigated all the important people in the harem. Naturally, Granny Zhu was one of them. After Zhu Momo came in, she respectfully paid her respects to the Emperor and bowed to her. Young Lady Shen, Empress Dowager invites you. There was not the slightest surprise on her face, not even the slightest bit of flattery. Shen Yueji seemed to have known that the Empress Dowager would summon her, so all this was within her expectations. She glanced at the man beside her. However, the man frowned in displeasure. Emperor, the Empress Dowager does not know that you are currently playing chess with young Lady Chen. If she knew, the Empress Dowager would definitely not let this servant disturb the Emperor and young Lady Chen's elegance. Granny Zhu smiled and explained. Shen Yueji put down the chess piece in her hand with a faint smile. It's just a game of chess to kill time. You can play chess at any time. Since the Empress Dowager invites me, allow me to change my clothes first, then follow Granny Zhu to Xian Palace to visit the Empress Dowager. Speaking up to this point, she paused for a moment, then smiled and apologized on her own. Speaking of this, it's also my fault. Logically speaking, I should have visited the Empress Dowager on the first day I arrived, but I dragged it on until now. I hope the Empress Dowager will not be angry with me. Granny Zhu smiled. Young Lady Shen is too serious. The white-haired Granny and the Empress Dowager have always been close, and the Empress Dowager has long known about young Lady Shen's character. She also likes young Lady Shen from the bottom of her heart. She can't wait to like young Lady Shen, so why would she be angry with young Lady Shen? If you want to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute favorite concubine, the Prince Regent, gets into trouble, follow Yudu Literature on WeChat. Chat about life, find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 841. He watched Shen Yueji enter the hall to change her clothes. Mo Wushang stayed there alone for a while, then got up and went in. The fastest update on the net. Mobile phone M. Com Your Majesty. Nanny Zhu hurriedly called out to him when she saw him entering the hall. The Emperor was even more displeased. He looked back and his eyes were as cold as a blade. Nanny Zhu inexplicably felt guilty. She could only find a topic to attract the Emperor's attention instead of his cold eyes. Your Majesty, Imperial Concubine is also in Xian Palace. Since Your Majesty is not in the Imperial study today, why don't you go to Xian Palace with Miss Shen later? Imperial Concubine has been spoiled since she was young. Sometimes when she gets angry, she doesn't even care about the Empress Dowager's words. But Your Majesty is different. She has always listened to you. With you following her, I believe that Imperial Concubine won't dare to make trouble for Miss Shen. Sure enough, after her considerate words for Shen Yueji's sake, the Emperor's expression became better. His cold expression softened a little. Don't worry, I will follow her. In the inner hall. Shuang she helped her change her clothes. She didn't know how many times she had exclaimed in admiration. "Miss, did you expect that the Empress Dowager would not be able to resist summoning you?" Shin Yueji simply applied a little powder on her face. Hearing this, he replied softly, "Yes, I expected it. I found that Miss is really getting smarter. I was worried that Miss would forget about the Empress Dowager in the Northern Underworld. Until now, you haven't taken the initiative to mention her. Not to mention visiting her, you didn't even mention her to me." "What?" Shin Yueji couldn't help but look at her with a funny smile. "Do you really think that I am arrogant because of the Empress Dowager's favor, just like those people outside think?" Hearing this, Shuangshi hurriedly waved her hand. No, miss, I don't think that. I don't mean that. Please don't look at me like that. www.com. I just think it's strange that you didn't go to visit the Empress Dowager. Although I know you must have your own reasons for doing so, but," she wanted to say something more, but when she saw Mo Wushang enter, she quickly stopped talking and made way for the man, so that it would be convenient for him to freshen up her young miss. Mo Wushang took the comb from her hands and gently combed Shin Yueji's hair. Looking at the beautiful girl in the mirror, the corners of the man's mouth rose slightly. His tone was not as sharp as when he spoke to outsiders. "If you don't want to go, then don't go. I'm here. Just stay in this palace and do whatever you want." "That won't do. The Empress Dowager is your biological mother. If I marry you, she will be my mother in the future. As a junior, filial piety to the elders is a matter of course. You only need to love me in the future. You don't need to care about her." He hugged her from behind and rested his chin on her head. "Shall I go with you? Are you so worried about your mother?" Shin Yueji looked at him through the bronze mirror. "You've been with me for so long. You'd better go to the imperial study to deal with your affairs in the court. Besides, the Empress Dowager is not an unreasonable person. I heard from Granny that the Empress Dowager seems to be a good person. And she likes me." Through the 2 days she had been in the Northern Underworld, she had more or less figured out the Empress Dowager of the Northern Underworld. She was not like the Empress Dowager of an ordinary country, who had the airs of an Empress Dowager. In comparison, the Empress Dowager of the Northern Underworld was not only amiable, but also fair in rewards and punishments. She only protected the people she liked very much, such as Pang Yuan, and also, her. If she wanted to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute pet concubine, regent, get into trouble, WeChat followed you read literature. Chat about life, find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 842. Pang Yuan is in Xi'an Palace. I'm worried about her. Shall I go with you? Huh? Shin Yueji drawled, are you worried about her or me? She turned around and looked at the man behind her. If you're really worried about me, you should be worried about me. What if she dares to face me in front of the Empress Dowager? Do you think I'll be at a disadvantage according to my character? The man lovingly scratched her pretty nose. Of course not. Isn't that all? Shin Yueji rolled her eyes. I've already said that if Beiming doesn't satisfy me, I'll leave. I don't care if she's an imperial concubine or not. If she dares to provoke me, I'll pay her back 10 times. Good girl, pay her back 100 times. I'll take care of everything. Even if you kill her, I'll take responsibility for it. These words made Shin Yueji feel more confident. She hugged the man and kissed him hard. The man enjoyed it very much. If he had known that saying such words could make her so happy, he should have understood this truth earlier and said more in the future. Eat something first. You haven't eaten yet. Let's go after you're full. Shin Yueji covered her hungry stomach. Will it make the Empress Dowager wait for a long time? Mo Wushang glanced at her with doting eyes. Who cares about her? At most, I'll wait for a while. I can't let my woman starve. Hearing this, Shin Yueji looked at him with a smile and said coquettishly, look at you. How old are you? Why are you still so childish? Mo Wushang held her hand in his palm. Liu Yu. I'm here. Set the table. Yes. Double Happiness saw that the two of them really ate as if there was no one else, even ignoring the Empress Dowager. Double Happiness felt a headache and held her forehead. Wasn't it too obvious? It was easy for the people in the harem to gossip. She saw that Nanny Zhu was still waiting respectfully outside. She walked out. Seeing her coming out, Nanny Zhu was also in a good mood. "Miss Shuangxi, is your miss well?" Shuangxi scratched her head awkwardly. Knowing that Nanny Zhu was the favorite of the Empress Dowager, she did not dare to be too presumptuous. Instead, she said, "Nanny Zhu, my miss hasn't eaten since she came back from the Imperial Garden. The Emperor is worried that she will be hungry, so he plans to accompany her to eat first and then go to see the Empress Dowager." Mobile M. While saying this, she had been carefully observing Nanny Zhu's expression, deeply afraid that Nanny Zhu would show the slightest displeasure. Fortunately, Zhu Momo didn't say anything. Instead, she smiled and revealed an understanding expression on her face. "That's right. Shen Gunyang will go to the Empress Dowager's place and Pang Guifei will also be there. We don't know what will happen, so it's good to eat more. This way, she would have the strength to argue with Imperial Consort Pang." Without the Empress Dowager present, Pang Yuan might do something excessive, but with the Empress Dowager present, she would more or less restrain herself and quarrel with Shen Yueji. It took a lot of energy to quarrel with Pang Yuan. Although she had never served Pang Yuan, she was still very clear about her character. Pang Yuan was unreasonable and could distort black and white. She could turn white into black and black into white. She saw that Shen Yueji was a quiet person. She was gentle and could generally be said, but in quarrel, she should be no match for Imperial Consort Pang. Fortunately, she had reminded the Emperor just now. According to the Emperor's love for her, he should not be at ease to let her go to Xi'an Palace alone. At that time, with the Emperor by her side, there should be no problem. If she wanted to chat with more like-minded people about super cute favorite concubine, Prince Regent, getting into trouble, WeChat followed You Read Literature chat about life and find bosom friends Tilda. Chapter 843. After all, Pang Yuan was still afraid of the Emperor. To be honest, Shuangxi was quite surprised that she didn't see any impatience on Nanny Zhu's face. She had always thought that the servants of the Empress Dowager were usually very arrogant and domineering, while Nanny Zhu gave people the impression that she was a kind elder. If it were someone else, she would have already flown into a rage after hearing what Nanny Zhu said. She would have been accused of being arrogant and spoiled. But Nanny Zhu obviously didn't give her such a feeling. Instead, she stood there with a good temper and said, "In that case, you and I will wait a little longer. It just so happens that Imperial Consort Pang is also with the Empress Dowager. With Imperial Consort Pang accompanying the Empress Dowager won't be anxious. Nanny Zhu, I would like to ask you a question." Nanny Zhu smiled. "Miss Shuangxi, if you have any questions, please ask." "There's no need to ask me. Does the Empress Dowager have a lot of prejudice against my miss?" "Oh." The smile on Nanny Zhu's face deepened. "Miss Shuangxi, why do you say so? Why do you say so? On the way to the Dark North Kingdom with my miss, Imperial Consort Pang once joined hands with the people from the Dark Poisonous Cult to kill my miss. The white-haired granny is a close friend of the Empress Dowager for many years, so the Empress Dowager must have known about this. www.com. This question had always been a doubt in Shuangxi's heart. She really couldn't figure it out and was afraid that if she asked her miss too much, the miss would tell her about it. This time, when she saw Nanny Zhu, perhaps because Nanny Zhu was easy to talk to, she asked without thinking. Nanny Zhu was stunned at first, as if she didn't expect that this little servant girl would be so bold as to even dare to ask about the matters between the masters. However, after being stunned for a while, she did not show any displeasure on her face. Instead, she said honestly, "Miss Shuangxi, this is a matter between the master and the son. Moreover, Grand Tutor Pang is a loyal minister who protects the country. When the late emperor was alive, he was the sworn brother of the late emperor. After the late emperor's death, the royal palace of the North Underworld can be so peaceful. For many years, the Empress Dowager and the Emperor have sat firmly on the throne of the North Underworld. Among them, the most indispensable thing is Grand Tutor Pang's loyal support. Grand Preceptor Pang's beloved woman passed away early to save the Empress Dowager. Concubine Pang was Grand Preceptor Pang's only daughter, so the Empress Dowager had always owed the Pang family something. When Concubine Pang was born, the Empress Dowager used this debt on Concubine Pang. Ever since she was young, Imperial Concubine Pang has been doted on by everyone. In this harem, no one dares to disrespect Imperial Concubine Pang. At this point, she looked at Shuangxi and sighed. No matter how much Imperial Consort Pang has gone overboard, no matter how many innocent women she has killed in the harem, no matter if the Empress Dowager knows about it or not, she will not do anything to her. The harem is a place full of intrigue. Everyone has their own plans, and everyone is looking out for themselves. The Empress Dowager was experienced and knew this very well. As for your miss, the Empress Dowager really likes Miss Shen. Before Miss Shen came to the northern underworld, the Empress Dowager had already told me about this. Otherwise, when Miss Shen was in danger, the Empress Dowager would not have persuaded the white-haired granny to help. Just from this point, it is enough to see that the Empress Dowager values the white-haired granny. Miss Double Happiness, on one hand, is Imperial Concubine Pang, whom the Empress Dowager has watched grow up. She has always felt indebted to her, so the Empress Dowager has always been tolerant of her. On the other hand, if you want to chat with more like-minded people about super cute pet concubine, Prince Regent, gets into trouble, follow Yudu literature on WeChat chatting about life and looking for a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 844. Miss Shen is the woman that His Majesty has taken a fancy to. The Empress Dowager is also an experienced person in the matters of relationships between men and women. Back then, she and the late Emperor were a couple that everyone in the northern underworld envied. To the Empress Dowager, the throne and the country are important, but nothing is more comfortable than two people who love each other hand in hand for a lifetime. Behind them, there is no longer that lonely dragon throne. Therefore, the Empress Dowager would also take a liking to someone that the Emperor liked. Because the Empress Dowager knows that the Emperor's eyes are not bad. Since the Emperor has taken a liking to your young miss, then your young miss must have something special about her. As for Imperial Consort Pang, I think the Empress Dowager will also be in a difficult position. The only thing she can do is to watch Imperial Consort Pang do something behind her back. Trying to hurt your Miss White-haired Granny has been staying in the shadows of Zhengyang Palace to protect your young miss. I believe that with White-haired Granny here, your young miss will be fine. Although the Empress Dowager had said so much, Shuangxi could tell that the Empress Dowager had always favored Pang Yuan. After all, the Empress Dowager had watched Pang Yuan grow up and recognized her as her daughter-in-law since she was a child. However, her family's young miss was personally favored by the Emperor, so he was forced to accept her family's young miss, not for anything else, but for his son. Now that she thought about it, Double Happiness could not help but rejoice that her young miss's actions were right. If young miss was really like the other women in the Dark North Harem, and went to greet the Empress Dowager as soon as she arrived in the Dark North Harem, the Empress Dowager might not even treat her young miss differently. While Double Happiness and Nanny Zhu were talking outside, Nanny Zhu the Emperor and Shen Yueji finished eating and came out. Seeing them, the two of them hurriedly bowed. Riding on the same dragon carriage as the Emperor, one could imagine how many envious gazes he had attracted along the way. By the time they arrived at Xi'an Palace, it was already past noon. The Empress Dowager did not seem to get impatient after waiting for a long time. Huashan Originals, domain names. Please remember New Bei Chinese website. Pang Yuan, on the other hand, had been waiting for a long time, but Shen Yueji still hadn't come. Pang Yuan had started to get impatient. During this period, she had naturally said many bad things about Shen Yueji. Basically, Shen Yueji didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and was arrogant because of the favor. She knew that she was summoned by the Empress Dowager, but she still made all sorts of excuses and dawdled. Previously, it was already disrespectful to the Empress Dowager by not paying her respects in advance. But now, it was even more disrespectful. Xi'an sat beside her and listened to her complaints quietly. He did not speak or interrupt. In the end, it was Pang Yuan who was tired of talking. Seeing that the Empress Dowager had no intention of paying attention to her, she cursed the damned old woman in her heart. She slowly became well-behaved and stopped talking. "The Emperor has arrived." A voice came from outside the hall. Xian's eyes widened slightly. Pang Yuan, on the other hand, immediately stood up straight and looked outside excitedly. She touched her face and hurriedly tidied up her clothes and makeup. "Brother Emperor is here." Her voice couldn't hide her excitement and joy. She probably hadn't expected that her brother, the Emperor, would actually come over at this time, and that she'd even come face to face with him. All of her previous displeasure vanished like smoke in thin air. She turned her head to look at Xiao, who was behind her. "Xiao, quick, look. Is my makeup messed up? If you want to chat with more like-minded people about super cute pet concubine, Regent, get into trouble, follow Yudu Literature on WeChat. Talk about life and find confidants tilde." Chapter 845. Xiao also replied in a flattered tone, "Replying to your ladyship has a graceful bearing. Without any makeup, you are as beautiful as a fairy. No woman in this world can compare to you. I believe that when the Emperor sees your ladyship, he will be very happy." Pang Yuan's heart bloomed with joy. After tidying up her clothes, she was about to kneel on the ground and greet the man who came in from outside. Xian glanced at her overjoyed expression and shook her head. Her son had not come to see her in Xian Palace for several days. She knew better than anyone why he came today. It was something that even an old woman like her could understand, but Wen was a fool. Did she really think that Shang came to Xian Palace for her? Shang didn't have her in his heart. She had seen it a long time ago, but she always thought that although Shang didn't have Wen in his heart, at least he didn't have anyone else. At least in his heart, the only woman who was worthy of him was Pang Yuan. Now that there was Shen Yueji, she shook her head and sighed. Pang Yuan would never have that possibility. Sure enough, when Pang Yuan raised her head, she saw not only the man she had been thinking about, but also a beautiful woman standing beside him. He held the woman's waist, and when his cold eyes looked at her, they were filled with infinite tenderness and pampering. She had never seen such a loving and pampering gaze from him in her life. It was as if, in his eyes, no matter how prosperous the world was, no matter how broad his vision was, it couldn't compare to the woman in front of him. For some reason, the smile on Pang Yuan's face suddenly froze on her face. She looked at the scene in front of her. Tears swirled in her eyes. She knew that her brother, the Emperor, liked this bitch very much. For this bitch, he had sacrificed a lot. It seemed that he was not afraid of offending the Emperor of Foam Country. Moreover, on the night this woman came to the northern underworld, her brother, the Emperor, had already pampered her. In the past, she had thought that her elder brother, the Emperor, was indifferent like an idler, aloof and untainted by worldly affairs. Only now did she know that her elder brother, the Emperor, was also a mortal. When faced with the woman he liked, he would also be so indulgent and careful. This time, Pang Yuan once again had a new understanding of the man she loved. Why? Why wasn't such a gentle and affectionate brother Emperor hers? Why wasn't his expression as affectionate as water used on her? Why? She couldn't understand. She couldn't understand the man whom she had loved for so many years. She couldn't understand how the man whom she had waited for so long, silently and willingly, actually appeared in front of her with another woman in his arms. It was such an eyesore. Now that she had thought it through, all the enthusiasm and joy just now was like a bucket of cold water, pouring down from the top of her head, pouring her warm body completely cold. Was he worried about Shen Yueji coming here alone? Or was he afraid that the Empress Dowager would make things difficult for her, so he personally accompanied her here, put down everything in the court, put down all the memorials in the imperial study? Even when she went to see him, she was rejected by Eunuch Liu. He said that he was dealing with the memorials and that he didn't have time. Yes, the emperor of a country had to deal with the court. As the concubines, they should be considerate and understanding, not. Read the latest chapter of Explosively Cute Pet Concubine. The Prince Regent gets into trouble with Clawbook House for free. Chapter 846. Pang Yuan's heart ached at the thought of this. Why? Why could she, Shen Yueji, do it? Why couldn't she? Did Shen Yueji love Brother Emperor as much as she did? Did she know Brother Emperor as long as she did? She had stayed by Brother Emperor's side for so many years without complaint or regret. She was just a third party who had ruined her relationship with Brother Emperor. Brother Emperor belonged to her. Brother Emperor belonged to her. She was so sad that she wanted to suffocate. She wanted to cry, but she didn't dare to. She could only watch as the man, who was as noble as a god, slowly walked in her direction. Her gaze was so hot that it felt like a ball of fire when it landed on him. On the mobile M. After his gaze left that woman, it returned to its usual indifference. No matter how hot her gaze was, he didn't even look at her. She clenched her fists under her long sleeves. Pang Yuan didn't kneel again. Instead, she ran towards that indifferent figure. A sweet smile once again appeared on her face. She opened her arms, wanting to protect him. Brother Emperor, Wan hasn't seen you for a long time. Wan really misses you. Did Brother Emperor miss Wan? As the beautiful figure dashed towards them, the crowd was stunned. Shen Yueji narrowed her eyes. She felt the man's aura decrease. The cold air in the hall also decreased rapidly. Pang Yuan didn't seem to notice. She still had a sweet smile on her face as she rushed towards Mo Wushang. She was about to fall into the man's arms. Mo Wushang held her by the waist and leaned against her. Just like that, the beautiful woman easily missed and fell to the ground. Not only was she in a sorry state, even the skin on her delicate palm was broken because she fell hard on the ground. Pang Yuan's eyes turned red from the pain. She had never been treated like this since she was a spoiled child. She fell to the ground and couldn't get up for a long time. Seeing this, Xiao hurried forward to help her up. Your Highness, are you all right? When she saw that Empress Dowager's palm was bleeding, she shouted anxiously, Empress Dowager, her ladyship's palm is bleeding. Empress Dowager, look, her ladyship's hand is bleeding. His Majesty, on the computer how could CI not see the blood on Pang Yuan's palm? She narrowed her eyes and glanced at the blood on Pang Yuan's palm with a pained expression. She hurriedly got down from her high seat and quickly walked in front of Pang Yuan. She glared at the side where the clouds and wind were blowing. Emperor, Wan is still your Gui Fei, how can you treat her like this? If the Empress Dowager really wants to talk about this matter, why don't we talk about the conspiracy between her and the dark poison cult? It seemed like a very ordinary sentence, but in reality, the invisible threat in it was extremely obvious. The expression on the Empress Dowager's face tightened. Even Pang Yuan paused for a moment and did not cry out in pain. She gritted her teeth and glared viciously at the silent woman behind her brother, the Emperor, with a hint of viciousness in her eyes. She acted as if she did not see the sorry state she was in. To be precise, she had a panoramic view of the entire Xi'an palace. From then on, she became a bystander, and this was her plaything in the midst of all the excitement. She should be happy, but in her heart, she must be mocking her. She was like a pathetic loser. If she wanted to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute pet concubine, the Prince Regent, gets into trouble, she would like to follow Yudu literature. Chapter 847. She, on the other hand, had a panoramic view of her sorry state. Just because. Brother Emperor liked her, and Brother Emperor loved her. She didn't have to do anything, and Brother Emperor would settle everything for her. First published on the new Beii Chinese website, the more she thought about it, the more she felt wronged. Before Shen Yueji was with her, Pang Yuan had never known what it was like. But after Shen Yueji was with her, she finally understood what it was like. It was so uncomfortable, as if she was about to suffocate. She had never understood that the first person to be with Brother Emperor was her, and the first person to accompany Brother Emperor was also her. And Shen Yueji was just a latecomer. She didn't know Brother Emperor as early as she did, didn't have a good background and status, and wasn't as beautiful as her. How could Shin Yueji compare to her? She looked at Shin Yueji with eyes filled with hatred. The depths of her eyes seemed to be tainted with poison. It was so venomous, so ruthless. If a person's gaze could kill, Shin Yueji would have already been dismembered by 5 horses. Shin Yueji naturally felt this intense hatred as well. She curled her lips into a faint mocking smile. She really didn't need to say anything. She only glanced at her indifferently. She had never taken this woman seriously, whether it was on the way to the northern underworld, or the 6-headed snake woman she met at the inn. Even if that woman wanted to die with her, to her, death was death, and there was nothing to be afraid of. She still didn't take her seriously. After coming to the northern underworld, when she really saw her, she also looked down on her even more. To her, other than a good background, a beautiful face, this woman really had nothing good to marry. For example, Shin Yueji used to only rely on the love and indulgence of her family to be lawless. However, Shin Yueji was much better than her. At the very least, Shin Yueji was straightforward and showed all her dissatisfaction on her face. However, Shin Yueji was different. The thoughts and schemes in her heart were too vicious and vicious. It was hard to like her from the bottom of their hearts. The fastest update on the website on the computer, she didn't reflect on what she had done, but put all the blame and sin on others, as if she had been wronged. Such a person, Shin Yueji smiled slightly. She felt that it was dirty to her eyes. The Empress Dowager saw that her palm was fine, or maybe it was because of the Emperor's ruthless words. She sat back on the high seat and looked at the woman who was protected by the man. She was indeed beautiful. She was different from those women who only had beautiful faces. There was a calm aura around her, as if she was not involved in the matter. If it was another woman who saw that the Emperor was so protective of her, she would probably be gloating over her misfortune. Even if she was present, she did not dare to be too obvious. At the very least, there should be some complacent expression on her face and in her eyes. However, this woman did not. From start to finish, she gave off an indifferent aura. She really didn't take this matter to heart. To be exact, she didn't take Pang Yuan seriously at all. Whether she made a fool of herself or not, it had nothing to do with her. Seeing this, Xian suddenly felt that this woman was indeed different from other women. To be honest, just this point alone made her quite likable. If you want to chat with more like-minded people about super cute pet concubine, the Regent, gets into trouble, follow Yudu Literature on WeChat. Talk about life and find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 848. She didn't wait for Shin Yueji to speak and said, "You're the woman from Foam Country, right?" Shin Yueji waited for the Empress Dowager to speak to her before kneeling down to pay her respects. First published on the website.com. Who knew that before she could kneel down, the man beside her grabbed her hand and said, "There's no need to kneel." Shin Yueji was speechless. Actually, kneeling wasn't a big deal. Putting aside the fact that she was the Empress Dowager of Dark North Kingdom, she was Mo Wushang's mother and her future mother-in-law, so she should kneel. Can think, the man so pampered her, fell in the eyes of Pang Yuan, the hatred is more upper level. However, the Empress Dowager squinted her eyes. No emotions could be seen in her deep eyes. Forget it. Since the Emperor loves you so much, he will feel heartache if you kneel down. On the other hand, I don't know how he will blame me. Shin Yueji, right? Yes. I won't bicker with you about you coming to the Northern Underworld Kingdom. However, I know a little about the private matter between you and the Emperor of the Feng Nation. Tell me, why did you give up the Emperor's favor and come to Dark North Kingdom's harem? That's right. Hearing the Empress Dowager's question, Pang Yuan climbed up from the ground and walked to the Empress Dowager's side. She supported her and said, "Shin Yueji, tell the Empress Dowager why you came to Dark North Kingdom. Although Brother Emperor was bewitched by you, the Empress Dowager and I aren't fools. You are the Emperor's favorite concubine. Why did you come all the way to Dark North Kingdom's harem? What's your purpose? You better tell me the truth. Otherwise, the Empress Dowager will make sure that you won't be able to return." Xian was slightly unhappy with Pang Yuan's arrogant tone, especially in front of Mo Wushang. Wasn't she trying to sow discord between her and Shang-Er? However, Shen Yueji's expression was the same as when she came. Not only was there no change in her expression, there wasn't even a hint of panic. As for the handsome man beside her, he took her hand and led her to a seat at the side. Shen Yueji's expression was neither servile nor overbearing. She looked at Xian's not-so-serious face and smiled slightly. Empress Dowager, in Foam Country, when I first saw the Emperor, I fell in love with him at first sight. However, the Emperor never took me seriously. In a fit of anger, I entered the palace to test how important I am in the Emperor's heart. The Emperor of the Foam Nation and I are only the Emperor's favorite concubine in name. Actually, nothing happened between me and him. H, you're talking nonsense. Since you're both concubines, there's no way there's such a pure relationship between the two of you. Shen Yueji, don't lie. Do you think the Empress Dowager will believe you? Whether he is innocent or not, the Empress Dowager will know once she asks the Emperor. Xian really didn't know about this. A woman's chastity was important, but as long as Shang-Er liked it, it wasn't worth mentioning to Xian. She knew that Mo Wushang pampered Shen Yueji on the day she came to the northern underworld, but she didn't think about it. Mo Wushang's handsome face gradually turned cold after hearing Pang Yuan's provocative words. His cold eyes glanced at her indifferently. Didn't Jia already tell you whether I am innocent or not? Could it be that you want me to say it again in person? Brother Emperor. How is that possible? When Shen Yueji told her, she didn't believe it at all. If you want to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute concubine, Prince Regent, gets into trouble, follow Yudu Literature on WeChat. Chat about life, find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 849. To be honest, they didn't really believe it. However, after hearing what her brother said, although he didn't explain it on purpose, it was enough to prove to them that Shen Yueji was a virgin. Even if she was the Foam Country's Emperor's favorite concubine, the Foam Country's Emperor had never touched her. Didn't that prove her purpose for coming to Dark North? And it was swept clean just like that. Was it because she liked her brother, the Emperor? No. She must not let them all think so. If she did, she was afraid Father and Big Brother have written to me. I believe that before long, Father and Mother will also come to the Dark North Kingdom to serve the Dark North Kingdom. If the Empress Dowager thinks that I have ulterior motives for getting close to the Emperor, then if Father and Big Brother come to the Dark North Kingdom and become loyal officials, will the Empress Dowager still think so? What did you say? Xian suddenly stood up. He couldn't hide the joy in his voice. Even his gaze towards Shen Yueji had a hint of joy. Although he was a first-rank general of Foam Country, she had heard of his name even though she was far away in Dark North. He had been an official for so many years, and he had made countless contributions to the Foam Kingdom. Not only was he outstanding in battle, but he was also able to fight 10,000 people alone on the battlefield. Pang Yuan smiled coldly. Empress Dowager, don't be happy too early. What if the Shen family and the Foam Country's Emperor came to an agreement and came to our northern Dark Kingdom with an ulterior motive? They are working together to harm our northern Dark Kingdom. Empress Dowager, don't forget that there were many spies from Foam Country in our court. It's hard to protect ourselves. This Shen family is also part of the same plan. The Shen family has been loyal officials of Foam Country for 100 years. Not only are they loyal to Foam Country, they even shed blood for the Foam Country's Emperor. How could they rely on Dark North just because of Shen Yueji? Pang Yuan's words were not unreasonable. Seeing Xian fall silent again very quickly, Pang Yuan's words made sense. Before this, Foam Country and Nanyue's Emperor worked together to fight against Dark North. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. After the sound of cold air being sucked in, there was a strange silence. The website was updated the fastest. On the computer, Shen Yueji stood up and looked directly at Pang Yuan, who was 3 steps away from her. The Southern Mountain, the Northern Dark Star, and the Phoenix Kingdom are the 3 most powerful countries in the world. When I was in the Phoenix Kingdom, I heard from Hong Fui that there were many rebels in the Northern Dark Star court. In order to deal with these rebels, the court was short of many talents. The Phoenix Kingdom and the Southern Mountain knew about this, so they wanted to take this opportunity to attack the Northern Darkstar and take it down. Does Imperial Consort Pang know about this? She was a woman in the harem, how would she know? However, it did not mean that the Empress Dowager did not know. Previously, Mo Wushang had indeed been busy with this matter, and she had also received some news from the Imperial Study. If the Foam Kingdom and Southern Mountain joined hands, it would definitely be disadvantageous to the North Sea Kingdom. They would not be able to resist at all. After all, they had lost too many useful talents to deal with the rebels. If the Foam Kingdom and Southern Mountain joined hands at this time, the North Sea Kingdom would be destroyed. As for why there was no movement from the Foam Kingdom and Southern Mountain, first, domain name, please remember Shen Yueji saw that Pang Yuan had nothing to say, so she smiled and continued, at that time, Hong Fui told me that the North Sea Kingdom still had the strength to fight back. There was an evil sect in the North Sea Kingdom called the Xianming sect. They wanted to chat with more like-minded people about super cute pet concubine, Prince Regent, get into trouble. Talk about life, find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 850. The Xianming sect has no lack of martial artists. If the emperors of the Feng Nation and the Southern Mountain really join hands to attack the North Sea and the Xianming sect will be able to resist them. Just as well. She smiled and said, this Xianming sect's holy daughter has been my close friend for many years. She's even not afraid of death for me. If I really wanted to harm Dark North, I wouldn't have helped Dark North and killed the envoy sent by Southern Mountain behind Feng Joqing's back. I wouldn't have needed to come to Dark North either. At that time, wouldn't it have been easier for Xianming sect and Southern Mountain of the Feng Nation to work together? Pang Yuan was rendered completely speechless by his words. That was right. Shen Yueji's words were not unfounded. Just by looking at the Empress Dowager's expression, it was enough to prove that what she said was true, and the Empress Dowager was also aware of these things. Her words were enough to prove that she did not have any ulterior motives in coming to the Northern Underworld. She had indeed come for her brother, the Emperor. For her brother, she had not hesitated to marry far away, had not hesitated to break off relations with the Emperor of the Foam Country, and had not hesitated to bear the infamy of being a traitoress who was scolded by the citizens of the Foam Country. He even brought his family over. Shun his high position and outstanding achievements on the battlefield. No matter where he went, his reputation would be resounding. With these proofs, not to mention Shen Yueji being the concubine of the North Underworld, even if she became the queen of the North Underworld, all the rumors would stop because of this, because she is the fastest to update on the internet. Mobile M.com. She had saved their Northern Underworld from a crisis. When their Northern Underworld was about to be robbed and killed, it was Shen Yueji who had saved them. The reason why they were safe and sound until now was also because she, Shen Yueji, was helping them. Shen Yueji, on the other hand, quietly accepted their schemes and their curses. She never explained or expressed her position. In their eyes, wasn't this the kind and virtuous empress they hoped for and needed? New Bei Chinese website. Pang Yuan felt sour. A ball of fire had gathered in her heart, but she couldn't say anything. She had no way to vent her anger. Her brother, the emperor, was present. She knew that what she had said just now had angered him, and he was already unhappy. If she continued to be unreasonable at this time, her brother, the emperor, would probably hate her even more and settle old and new debts together. Not only would the Empress Dowager not be able to protect her, even her father would not be able to protect her. Your Highness, Xiao saw that her face was frighteningly pale. Afraid that she would fall, she quickly supported her. Pang Yuan's face was deathly pale. Empress Dowager, Brother Emperor, Wan suddenly feels unwell. I want to go back and rest. She had thought that after she had said these words, her brother, the Emperor, would look at her tenderly and summon an imperial physician for her. She did not expect him to be able to warm her up, but at the very least, he would look at her tenderly. But from beginning to end, her brother Emperor didn't even look at her. She clenched her fists in grief. Only the Empress Dowager glanced at her indifferently. That glance did not have the usual care and tenderness. She said indifferently, "Since you feel unwell, go back and rest. Showa, look after your highness." "Yes, Empress Dowager." There were tears in her eyes. Pang Yuan gritted her teeth and held them back. She looked back 3 times with every step. In her eyes, her brother, the emperor, was so tall and handsome, as beautiful as an immortal. He was like a 9th heaven immortal who did not eat the food of the world. But such a perfect man did not belong to her. If you want to chat with more like-minded people about super cute pet concubine, Prince Regent, get into trouble, follow Yudu literature. Chapter 851. She had always thought that Brother Emperor was hers. One day, he would become her man, so she was willing to wait. No matter how many years she had to wait, as long as Brother Emperor could look at her once more, as long as Brother Emperor was willing to love her, she was willing to wait until her hair turned white. But now, he looked at Shen Yueji with a gaze that she couldn't be jealous of or envious of. That's right, she had the gaze that she longed for, but it didn't belong to her. Shen Yueji. She gritted her teeth in hatred. So what if you have Brother Emperor's liking? So what if Empress Dowager protects you? Even if your parents come to Foam Country, even if you get close to Brother Emperor because you really love him and want to be with him, so what? Brother Emperor is mine. He used to be, is still, and will always be mine. One day, I will let Brother Emperor know who truly loves him and who is loyal to him in this world. It's me, not you. The woman who is qualified to stand by Brother Emperor's side is me, not you. In this world, only I am worthy of Brother Emperor. After Pang Yuan left, Mo Wushang held Shen Yueji's hand and stood up. Seeing that they were about to leave, Xian's eyes widened. Where are you going? We've already seen each other. Jia is going back to rest. Mo Wushang didn't look at her. Instead, he gently hugged the little woman in his arms. The fastest update on the internet on the computer, Xian was so angry that she gritted her teeth. Emperor, do you still care about your mother? If I don't, why would I bring her to see you? Xian sneered. You didn't bring her to see me. You're obviously afraid that I'll do something bad to her, so you're guarding against me. The man didn't bother to explain. He just stood there, silently answering her suspicions. It was accurate. Xian didn't believe that she wasn't angry. However, when she saw Shen Yueji's pretty little face, she was no longer angry. This future daughter-in-law was really pretty. Just this little face alone was enough to make a person of her age like her like a lotus flower. The more she looked at it, the more she liked it. With Nanny Zhu's help, she stood up and walked towards Shen Yueji. You're Jia? Shen Yueji was stunned by the Empress Dowager's baffling confirmation. Didn't she just ask this? After talking for so long, she still didn't recognize him? Zhu Mama covered her mouth and snickered. Miss Shen, don't mind it. Just now, Consort Pang was present, so the Empress Dowager didn't dare to be too obvious. After all, the Pang family had worked hard and made great contributions. Shen Yueji had more or less heard of Grand Tutor Pang's name. It was not easy for the Empress Dowager to side with Pang Yuan on the surface and help her behind her back. Even the words she questioned her just now must have been said deliberately in front of Pang Yuan. As a result, it would be too embarrassing to leave Pang Yuan alone here. Look, you've just come to the Dark North Kingdom, and I don't even know what treasures I should give you. I bet you're already used to these things. Nanny Zhu, quick, take out the box I put inside. Yes, Empress Dowager. Before long, Nanny Zhu came out with a red box in her arms. She looked surprised. She didn't expect that the Empress Dowager would give such a precious thing to Shen Yueji. After all, it was left by the late emperor for the Empress Dowager. The fastest update on the internet if you want to chat with more like-minded people about explosively cute pet concubine, the Prince Regent, gets into trouble, follow Yudu literature on WeChat talk about life, find a bosom friend Tilda. Chapter 852. Even Mo Wushang was stunned when he saw the box in Granny Zhu's hands. This jade bracelet was given to me by the late emperor when he was still alive. Since he passed away, I've been reluctant to wear it. I miss him every day, so I took it out to have a look. There's a pair in total, and I'll give you one. In this way, we can call each other sisters. Shen Yueji. Even the white-haired granny, who had the best relationship with the Empress Dowager, didn't have this kind of treatment. Nanny Zhu watched Ci take a Rui jade Rui very naturally. She took Shen Yueji's hand and forced her to put it on. Ci looked at the fair and tender little arms in front of him and really liked them very much. When I was young, I had a pair of hands just like Jia's, fair and clean. I don't know how beautiful they were. Unfortunately, I'm old now, so old that only the skin is left. But this jade bracelet looks really good on your wrist. It's like it was made for you. Shen Yueji awkwardly pulled her hand back and wanted to take off the jade bracelet. The feeling of wearing this jade bracelet was indeed incomparable to that of ordinary precious bracelets. Just by wearing it on the wrist, if one didn't think about it carefully, one would think that there was no bracelet on the wrist at all. Moreover, from the expressions of the people present, it seemed that this thing was very precious to the Empress Dowager. If so, it was even more difficult for her to accept it. After all, she wasn't the kind of person who liked jewelry. Moreover, she was not used to wearing these things on her hands. It would feel awkward. Even if she brought it back, she would put it aside. After a long time, she forgot about it. Mo Wushang saw that she had the intention to take it off, so he held her hand. Since it's a gift from Mother, just accept it. If you don't like it, you can take it off when you go back. Nanny Zhu was speechless. Your Majesty, in front of the Empress Dowager, you really, really hurt the Empress Dowager's heart. Yes, if you don't like it, you can take it off when you go back. Anyway, this jade bracelet is a good treasure. It's priceless. It can't be exchanged for several cities. She used to like Pang Yuan so much, but she didn't give this jade bracelet to her. Now, she just met Shen Yueji once, and she couldn't wait to give it to her as a gift. One could only imagine how much she liked Shen Yueji. Shen Yueji was pulled into a passionate conversation by the Empress Dowager. Shen Yueji listened by the side and was undoubtedly curious about how she and Mo Wushang got to know each other and how they got together. Then, in front of Mo Wushang, she started badmouthing him, saying how good she was as a mother-in-law, and that he should treat her well instead of Mo Wushang. The fastest network update mobile M.com. Shen Yueji was amused. In the end, the man couldn't stand it anymore and pulled her away. Chapter 853. Is that so? Shen Yueji's eyes widened in shock. Just being immune to poison was enough to see how precious it was. How could the Empress Dowager give such a precious thing to her? This jade Rui was given to my mother by my father. What my mother loves is not its immunity to poison and longevity, but my father. Every time I miss my father, I take it out to have a look, but I'm never willing to wear it on my hand, for fear of spoiling it. Looking closely, the surface of the jade Rui was very smooth and translucent. It was obvious that it had been cleaned frequently. The network was updated the fastest. Mobile M.com. Seeing this, Shen Yueji felt a touch of sympathy for the Empress Dowager of the North Underworld. Speaking of which, your mother is really pitiful. Your father loves her so much. Why, speaking of this, she closed her mouth. The affairs of the royal family had always been like this. Feelings could not overcome some. Thinking of this, she looked at Mo Wushang, and her dark eyes flashed. You won't die early and leave me a widow, will you? The man was stunned at first, then stared at her for a while and laughed. Do you want me to die so much? Of course not. If you die, I will be a widow. In this world, which woman is willing to let herself be a widow? Don't worry, as long as you don't leave me, I will never die. Even if it's for you, I will live. I will accompany you to see the prosperity of the world. Shen Yueji's heart moved, and she hugged his neck. Actually, your mother is quite good. Well, she has always been good. She never forces people, nor does she use her power to oppress people. She will not hold back for the person she likes. But she has only seen me once. Why does she like me so much? Mo Wushang stared at her for a while, and suddenly smiled, probably because you are good-looking. Me? Good-looking? Shen Yueji's mouth twitched. Speaking of good looks, Xian's good looks alone. She was still beautiful even when she was old. When she was young, she was a great beauty that could cause the downfall of a city and a state. This was true good looks, wasn't it? New August Chinese website. What's more, there was no lack of beauties in Dark North's harem. She should have seen many beauties of all shapes and sizes. If beauty could move her, then Pang Yuan could move her too, right? She smiled. Don't say these words to coax me. In my opinion, the Empress Dowager clearly loves me because you like me, so she also likes me. The man chuckled. Of course. After all, her future grandson can only rely on you. Shen Yueji, her pretty face blushed unconsciously, almost instantly reminding her of the way he treated her that night. She grabbed the man's collar tightly. Mo Wushang, I think we need to set a rule. When it comes to sex, we can't be unrestrained. Right now, you need to focus on the court, not with me. The man's thin lips ambiguously approached her. For the royal family to reproduce the next generation, it is important to spread branches and leaves. Other people at my age will have grandchildren in a few years. Shen Yueji, this kind of thing needs more practice. Skill makes perfect. After a while, will be able to accept this feeling. No. I can't accept it. Unknowingly, they had arrived at the main hall of Xingyang Palace. The man directly carried her all the way to the bed, put her on the bed, leaned over and kissed her. Shen Yueji was shocked. Just as she was about to resist, her clothes were untied by him. All her resistance at this moment was lost, and she could only be at his mercy. If you want to chat with more like-minded people about exploding cute pet concubine, regent, get into trouble, WeChat, talk about life, find a bosom friend. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.